That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.
Are we live?
We're live, but Trey can't stare at me because I don't know where he went. Probably went to pee. Welcome to One Cast Fishing Friday. Glad to be back. It's been a couple weeks. We've had a bunch of stuff going on. What's going on? David Fuchs. Glad to be back, my friend. I hope you're doing well up there in New Jersey. Running around at 2 miles an hour with your trolling motor because your lakes, you're not allowed to run a big motor. But never mind. And you can't pump your own gas. But Ed, I digress. Real quick before we get into it, as always, we want to make sure we thank One Cast Fishing. Head to onecastfishing.com. Use the code TheOneCast, all one word. He said truth, so that you know I'm telling the truth. Again, that's onecastfishing.com. Code TheOneCast, all one word. Get you some snagless jigs, long neck hooks, weedless neds, soft plastics, all of that. It is definitely big football jig dragon season, Carolina rig season. Those long neck hooks are nice for a big worm. And you can also check out the Ned heads if that finesse stuff is your game. It is not mine. Ben catches a lot of fish on it. I just don't do it. What's going on, Paul? I'm going to talk about you getting the internet in North Carolina all fired up here in a minute because I thought it was hilarious. But before we get into that, make sure you head to Carolina Waters and see what's going on. Mike Johns, 4/5 and LT. I'm glad Bum 4/5 and LT. So we all have nicknames now for Mike Johns.
I'm Bum. That's LT.
And I'm 4/5. Yeah. So in case anybody wondered, Bum, LT, 4/5. I don't know why you're LT because aren't you Sart?
No, that's LT.
So you're Bum?
I'm a bum.
I just assumed you were the bum.
He tells me to get a job all the time. I'm a bum.
I want to know where 4/5 came from.
Oh, we'll get into it. Hold on. Let me finish this. Carolina Waters.
My first thing went to 3/5, and I was like, oh, what is
Carolina Waters NC.com. Code the OneCast, all one word. Get you some UPF gear. Trey's rocking. I've got one of their t-shirts on. Ben's got a hat. My dad's here, so we drove his truck, so I didn't have a hat because they're all in my truck. But yeah, make sure you head over there, check out CarolinaWatersNC.com. Code the OneCast, all one word, save 20%, get you some gear. Hobie Eyewear, we've been talking about them at length, HobieEyewear.com, or use the link that's in our bio and everything. I don't have it pulled up. I'll get it in a second and post it for everybody. LT is always out of the loop, he said. Yeah, we know, Mike. We try. He was busy with his father-in-law and family stuff, so we can't beat him up too bad for that. But
that's right. That's right.
Again, HobieEyewear.com. I'll post a link in the chat here in a little bit. If you haven't got yours yet, make sure you do. The floating frames, the lenses are high quality. Saved Trey's eyeball a couple weeks ago, and helps you see fish in the water. Keep your eyes protected. Last but not least,
shoot a text or give Eric Schwinn a call at 936-494-9686, or send him an email at eschwind@mossyoakproperties.com. He's serving the Sandhills area. He's your Mossy Oak Properties broker. So whether or not you're looking for land or some form of residence, he's going to hook you up. So shoot him a call, shoot him a text, or shoot him an email. Let him know that the OneCast sent you.
Yeah. Is that everybody?
That's it.
What else we got?
So I do want to say something before we jump into it. So I got a couple buddies, and I want to give a huge shout out to Hobie and Carolina Waters. So a buddy of mine and 3 other former special operations guys are doing what's called the world's toughest row. And that takes place next June, I believe. And they are going to make the trek rowing a boat from California to Hawaii. It's 2,800 miles. And so this boat that they have has a desalinization machine in it. So it takes that salt water in, produces fresh water. These guys reached out to me and said, hey, do you have any companies that would be on board, supporting this? It's for veterans, PTSD, and suicide awareness. And so Hobie is graciously going to hook those guys up with a bunch of floating frame sunglasses, and Carolina Waters is going to hook them up with UPF gear, neck buffs, gloves, all those shirts that we love to talk about to protect those guys in the sun. And it's a really interesting thing. I never even heard about it before, but Paramount Pictures is doing like a special on it. And the only 2 ways that these teams can fail at this, well, I guess there's 3 ways they can fail at making this trek from Cali to Hawaii.
Quit. You die.
I guess there's 4 ways. So you die.
I figured that was one of the 3.
You die. you quit, or
You get lost to sea.
so I guess there's 3. Yeah, I get stop. You're messing me up.
No, it's fine.
So the administrative way that they can fail is if they make it to Hawaii and they don't have all of the material that they left with, right? So any of their energy bar wrappers, anything like that, for conservation efforts and stuff like that. So they're going to be making that trek across the Pacific from Cali to Hawaii. Hobie Eyewear, Carolina Waters, supporting 4 old ex special operators making that row across the Pacific Ocean. It's a really cool thing. So once I get the link to their donation page, we'll go ahead and throw that up for you guys. They're looking at big companies to sponsor them. It's a huge deal. And I just want to say thank you to Carolina Waters and Hobie Eyewear.
That was what? There's like 2 SEALs, an Army special operator, and
2 Army special operators and or maybe it's 2 Army special operators, a Marine special operator,
that's right,
and a Navy special.
And a SEAL. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's a really cool thing. I never knew about it till Trey's buddy hit him up and told him about it, and then Trey told me about it and told us about it. So definitely thank you to Carolina Waters and Hobie Eyewear for helping those folks out. Looking forward to seeing that whole thing go down because it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, dude. Jamie is the guy's name. I served with him on a deployment to Afghanistan back in 2012 or something like that, and he goes, dude, I'm 55 years old. I can't believe I volunteered to do this. I was like, I wouldn't do it, but It's for a great cause. We always talk about it with FX3, with Take a Warrior Fishing, with Heroes Harvest, with Special Operations Bass Anglers. I mean, the list goes on and on with these 501c3s that are out there. It takes a village to help combat veteran PTSD and suicide awareness and all that stuff. And this is just going for a great cause. So it's something that Hobie stood behind. It's something that Carolina Waters stands behind. And hopefully all you guys stand behind it too.
Yeah. All right. Now we got all that out of the way. Let's talk about fishing. Mike Johns, what are you wowing? So 4/5 Ben came because I missed one of our 5 regular season tournaments.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So he said I was only 4/5 of an points champion for the year. No more 22 a day. Need to be 0 a day. That's right, David.
Hands down.
Definitely do. Couldn't agree more. And lots of good organizations. Sorry about that. Working towards that. And, more and more collaboration between those organizations, which is great because it extends resources, all of that good stuff. So
we do have to apologize. We haven't been as consistent with Fishing Friday Live. There's been a lot going on, guys. Obviously, tournament season just got over for Pete and I. Ben's been grinding it out. His family's getting ready to make a big move. Ben's not going nowhere, but you're getting ready to make a big move. We've had some losses in some families around here. There's a loss in my family. There's a loss in someone else's family. So there's been a lot going on, but we needed to jump on here to inform you guys of what was going on. And then we're going to talk that fishing that we want to talk about. It's the dog days of summer right now. I mean, it's 9 million
What's
degrees.
up, Chris? Welcome, man.
It's getting there.
My kids are inside. They've been laid up for like 3 or 4 days.
Well, today is the longest day of the year.
Man, it's crazy hot, dude. Like, and I know Mike even said it. I think it was 8 million degrees Fahrenheit down in Georgia today. But man, it is getting hot. But with that, what's that mean? That means some deep fishing. I mean, it still means shallow fishing. You can still catch them shallow, and we're seeing that. We got to give a huge shout out to is it Cliff Prince?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I got that right?
Yeah,
he won on Wheeler for the Bassmaster Elite Series, and that was exciting because that was his first win out of like 140 something tournaments.
14 years. Yep.
14 years on the Elite Series. Finally got
close
that
a few
trophy.
times.
Yep.
I think he would have won one other one on his home lake, but he had 5 dead fish one day, so he couldn't call anything, and he ended up losing by ounces. So he had some close calls, some tough breaks.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about Cliff. I know the name because he's been around forever, but everybody spoke so highly of him. Basically said him and Gussie, and you always hear how nice Gussie is, but it's a toss up. Between him and Jeff Gustafson. I don't know. Gustafson. Gustafson?
Gustafson?
Gustafson? Gussie. It's a toss up between who is the nicer of the guys. So
That's right.
when you see a good guy that's been around for a long time, a new, Trey talks about how he always likes to see new winners, even though we see new winners a lot. But to see somebody that's been grinding for that long finally put it all together and win in pretty convincing fashion. At that grinding a chatterbait, no forward facing sonar, just a fun derby out there. He
really did it. So outside of the chatterbait, because everybody knows that I suck at that bait, and I'll be the first one to tell you, A, because I don't throw it, and B, when I do throw it, I don't get bit. But he did it in that summer fashion that we're going to talk about that I really like. He really held down a spot where he was able to just pick it apart, wait for fish to reload. And he found something where there was better quality of fish coming to him than anyone else had.
What I love about that is he was fishing offshore.
Yep.
But he was only fishing in like 3 foot.
I know.
Because of the way that lake sets up. I mean, they're power pulled down in the middle of Lake Wheeler. It's pretty crazy to see. But then to have John Cox go in there and whack him for 4 days on a frog when everybody was like, trying to find him offshore. It's summer, it's hot. And he goes back into a little backwater slough under some power lines and just whacks him on a frog for 5 days.
So I didn't want to take away that victory from Prince, right? But I did want to bring that up. Like, you saw a guy out there fishing the grass, ripping a chatterbait through it, dragging a big worm, whatever the case may be.
Drop shot and little. He did a little bit of all the.
But then there's John Cox
with a frog.
And I don't know if you guys watched this on live, but it looked like somebody puked all over John Cox's boat. Like, it was the most disgusting thing. I think I even sent a text. I was like, John Cox's boat looks disgusting right now, but it's because he was in the most thickest, just nasty. It probably smelled back there too. And he was even saying on live or in one of the one of the tournament day interviews, he was like, man, I was actually really concerned about being under those power lines. Cause like every time I'd raise my rod tip up, I'd hear like
feel it buzzing. He said I could hear it in my sleep. It was also really funny. If you watched live, they had who'd they have on? Jason Christie went on there.
Yeah.
When they do the third day. So Saturday when cut day, and John Cox catches one on a frog, and Christie's like, man, he's like, everybody knows I love to do that, but nobody can do it like him. And then John Cox sat down and gave a seminar.
Yeah.
Talked about the frog, what he was doing. And Christie made the comment. He goes, if John Cox ever fished an entire tournament day, everybody on the Elite Series would be fishing for second. They said, but because he never stops talking, he only fishes like 4 hours a day. And I thought that was pretty funny, but it's true. If you ever get to meet John, he's a super nice guy. And he will talk your ear off. And he's great when he's on live because he takes the time, even during a derby, to explain what he's doing.
Yeah.
And that grass he was fishing was super nasty. It was like half dead, half alive, all matted out. No, not even a forward-facing transducer on his boat. And third place or second. Yeah, second or third.
I don't know.
I can't remember which one. Second or third.
We made it to the top 10.
Yeah. Throwing a frog on Wheeler Lake in June.
You know how good of a who's sharing the juice? Well, hopefully we're sharing the
Cox. We're gonna share a little juice here in a minute.
Cox definitely shares the juice. So much so, David, 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 you know that show Schitt's Creek. That's great. So much so that Pete went out and bought every Swamp Lord frog that they had left.
I went to Omnia Fishing and they had 5 in stock and I bought all 5 of them.
So that's how good.
Because Cox said he went on Tackle Warehouse and bought every single one they had during the derby.
Yeah, because they only had like one left or
so. I'm like, I got this Omnia Fishing 5 ordered to the house. I'll sell you one $50.
It was. I think as much of a grinder as Wheeler was, and that's a TVA system. They were not pulling any current really at all during that derby. But it as much as it sucked because it was in the dog day of summer type deal. It was really refreshing to see how they picked apart that body of water from frogging to chatterbaiting to dragging a 10-inch worm to whatever the case may be.
We'll have one more grinder on the Elites too, because they're going to Smith Lake in Alabama this week coming up. It's going to be super hot.
Yeah, with this heat wave that came through.
Ooh, boy, that high pressure system. I know where they're going to be when we're on the river tomorrow. Though.
Yeah.
I know right where they're going to be.
Yeah, Ben, were you able to catch any of the Wheeler tournament?
I caught some of the updates.
Replays.
The updates.
And then the Chowan was, the week before we didn't get to go live for that because we had our championship.
Championship, yeah.
And Drew Gill winning that one with a drop shot. So
Yeah,
definitely showed some stuff, but it was interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit with the Chowan River and that system. So it was really interesting to talk to guys I know that live over there and spend a lot of time over there that went out and observed those guys. And 100% they were not fishing for the big fish. They were finding little isolated pockets of cover that had a bunch of fish on them that were scoreable and catching those, because they were like, we would watch them out where they were fishing, and I could go up to a cypress tree and catch a 7-pounder. But nobody was doing that because it was so few and far between that you couldn't keep up with a guy that was going to catch 72-pounders.
That's right.
So the format kind of didn't show what that place could do, just because of the way they have to do that.
And they did limit some of the water too.
Oh, they did.
Yeah,
they did.
They limited a big portion. Some of it's really good this time of year. The alligator's really good this time of year, and that was off. Some of the other rivers not so good. They're better earlier in the year, but the alligator was the big one. If guys could have run down there, that's where you can go catch 10 or 15 7-pounders. Yeah. I mean, like and I'm being realistic there. You could also see some redfish get caught and all kinds of cool stuff.
And y'all need to check out Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, all that stuff. Next Thursday at noon, we're gonna have an episode with Zach Burge drop. Zach Burge was gracious enough to jump on and talk about how he broke down the Chowan and Roanoke River system before he got here, when he got here, and then what his bait choices were.
And that bait's coming out.
So,
but he made the mistake of telling us one that's similar. And I bought every single one Tiger Warehouse had today. They had 8. I got them all coming. They'll be here Monday.
And he's trying to buy a house. So you guys are you're definitely gonna want to hear that episode. Huge shout out to Seth Ellis for
I'm just kidding, Chelsea,
for making that connection happen. So by the way, those guys are BBT's on their way up to the James River.
Their practice starts tomorrow, right?
Yep. So they're heading up there. That's a
What's up, Jeff?
True title fishery. What's up? And so they're going from the Chowan, which is a wind-driven tide, to the James, which is a true tidal fishery. So that'll be pretty interesting. And then when they get back, we might do a 2 versus 2 tournament with Zach Burge and Cole Harris and Seth Ellis and Josh Hooks and all of us. And we're thinking about doing a house podcast with all those guys. So stay tuned for that.
Could have a fun one.
Could be a fun one. We're not even going to ask them fishing related questions.
No, that's just going to be that'll just be a good time.
Exactly. And whoever loses the 2v2 is going to have to wear like dissolvable underwear and like jump in the water or something. I don't know. It's not going to be me.
Yeah, we'll be over there too, Jeff. I'm not fishing the club tournament. My dad's in town for our annual river trip, so I'm going to be over there jacking all the fish that you guys are trying to catch for the derby. Yeah. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I was looking at water levels today. She's down a little bit. So I'm trying to come up with a plan of what I'm going to do. But we're going to go out there tomorrow and have some fun. But it's hot. It's sunny. You know what that means, Jeff.
Yep. So
I don't need to say any more because I know y'all got a derby. So you don't have to put any info out there, but I'll call you tomorrow.
Yeah. So let's talk some summertime fishing. Let's talk about, summertime fishing is relative.
What's going on, Pete?
Well, I've never seen Pete on here.
I know. I like that
Pete?
There's another Pete. He said first time on the live. What's up, y'all? What's going on, Pete? Glad to have you. Welcome to Fishing Friday Live. We try to do it every Friday.
It's been a couple weeks.
It's been a couple weeks with tournament season winding down and everything. During tournament season, it doesn't always happen every week, but we definitely try. So rocking my Carolina Water shirt, glove, and net gator. That is good. I lost a net gator on Harris last weekend.
Did you?
Yeah, the one Chelsea had that like a bandana. I went to take off to go check a school, and it was like.
Oh, Jeff, one of the things I've noticed is my thumbs, like the tips of my thumbs and my fingers, they got a sweet tan line on them now from the gloves. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, those gloves are awesome. They're holding up really well. Those neck buffs are super awesome too. Pete had one waterboard him when he got ejected out of the boat at Murray. What just happened?
I did. And we could talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about me getting ejected out of the boat at Murray. We don't have to talk about that, but yeah, if you have one of those buffs on and you go in the water, it will suction to your face and it will cause a moment of panic. So I will just let you know to prepare yourself mentally if you decide to go barefoot water skiing at 70 miles an hour that
Make
that
sure you
thing
pull
will
your neck.
suction cup to your head,
Yeah.
and when you're trying to right yourself and get moving, it will panic you a little bit.
Trust me, it wasn't Pete's first time almost drowning in the water.
It wasn't.
His dad's.
It was the
in there.
first time my dad didn't almost drown me in the water.
Oh, yeah.
But it was not my first near death experience in water, and that I mean it's part of it. I think all of us probably have a story at some point in time where either we got in rough water or something happened that was, a little bit sketchy. You get caught in a storm. I know you and Mike Johns had to cuddle on the floor of his boat one time.
Yeah, because I was going to get struck by lightning.
I wasn't saying it. I know that's what I mean. Like it had to be scary.
And I'm a cuddler.
But let me ask you honestly, Mike. I hope you're still on. Is the thought of getting struck by lightning or cuddling with Mike Johns more terrifying?
Who's Big Spoon?
Mike.
Cuddling with Mike Johns is terrifying. Hey, Pete. When are y'all getting Bassin through on the podcast, man?
Oh, yeah.
You know what? Rick has been absolutely awesome. We love him. We'll get him on the show here soon. We'll get him on the show. But by the way, Pete, if you don't know, since it's your first time on the show, go to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, whatever you listen to. If you are a podcast listener, and leave us a review. And then send us a screenshot of the stars or whatever the review is to any of our socials. And then we'll get you entered into our giveaway because we still have 3 months left?
2 months.
2 months.
3 months.
Two,
I can't
yeah.
remember.
So we've already given away a Lowrance Fish Finder.
So next week?
Yep. So next week is the last week.
No, in July.
Yep.
In July, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So
David Fuchs says, still want to hear that story. You never talked about it with Ike. We did not talk about it with Ike because I didn't want that episode to turn into what it would turn into on social media with the way people are. So we elected to not bring it up with him. There was a brief mention of it. The episode before that, it was just us talking, and I did tell the story, but yeah.
Long story short, P got ejected.
Long story short, I got ejected out of a boat running 70 miles an hour during an Elite Series event while I was marshaling, and I survived and broke a couple ribs, and we finished the day. And yeah, so now I got a story, and yeah, I'm alive, I'm well, but won't ever do that again, and don't recommend it if you ever want to try. So, but yeah, summer fishing though.
All right.
Back to what we were going to talk about. Well, we keep getting. Hold on before we do that. I know there's one more. Hold on. Pete, are you the gentleman that saw our sticker at the Chevy dealer out there in Durham when we were there for the Fishers of Men tournament meeting? I know somebody did, and I thought their name was Pete, and I hope that I remembered you right. If I didn't, I'm sorry to whoever that is, but that's who okay, awesome. So
awesome. Glad
you're here live. I'm glad that the sticker brought you here. I know you've listened to some of our recordings and enjoyed it. And yeah, we'll definitely get Rick, aka Bassin, through on the podcast because he's got some cool stuff he could talk about. Not just the fishing, but his work to talk, like figuring out algorithms and stuff on social media is second to none, like some of the stuff he's done. So we definitely want to get him on to talk about it. It's just getting schedules aligned and all of that can be tough. But yeah, let's talk summer fishing now.
So summer fishing is probably
it's here.
Ben and Mai's favorite time.
I hate it.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm starting to like it more. Okay. I really am. I'm getting better at it. Trey has taught me much more about it. So I can't say that I hate it. It's not my favorite way to fish unless they're eating a flutter spoon.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah. Anyway,
so why, Ben, to you, why is this time of year such a great time of year?
So I think for me mentally, I think to me, when they're offshore, regardless of the time of year, but typically we're out in the summertime because it's nice, and when it's 35 degrees in the wintertime,
sucks.
Yeah. You don't go out there as much. But to me, so those fish, not all fish, but most fish move off deeper water. And so you just drive around your boat looking for high percentage areas. And then you can make a couple casts to it. And whether or not they're biting or not, then you can keep moving on. So to me, you're looking for a lot more high percentage areas. And so like mentally for me, I think I've convinced myself there's less guesswork involved.
There is.
Once you kind of find them.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that sometimes it's way more difficult to find them in the summertime or find good fish. You just got to be looking in the right spots.
Yeah, I think I would second that. I think there's 2 times of the year we're not going to include like the fall because I don't typically find them on electronics on the fall. But the one time a year when you really can rely on your side scan imaging, your down scan, your 2D sonar and stuff is right now, at least where we live. I don't know if it's like that all over the country. And summertime fishing, can be 18, depending on where you're at, in the thermocline setting up, like can be 15 feet, can be 8 feet. It just depends on where you're at. But for me, when I find fish, so I don't like to fish in the blind. I really don't like going down a bank line. And if they're not there, I don't like just throwing at stuff. To me, it's just, I want to hit those areas where I know the fish are at.
I'm the same way. I hate fishing in the blind.
Yeah. Fishing in the blind to me feels like I'm wasting time. Right. So this time of year is really when you can get intimate with your electronics. You can start to understand what you're looking at with side scan. Now that we're incorporating forward facing sonar, you get to see the difference and what type of fish provide feedback to your sonar unit, whether or not it's a crappie or catfish, and we'll talk about that, or largemouth or whatever the case may be. So for me, that's why I really like this time of year. You can get off the water about 10:30, 11 o'clock and be done after you like whacked a giant school before like all the wake boaters and stuff get out there. So the days are a lot longer. But the biggest challenge, and you talked about it, is finding giants. Finding giants in the summertime in those mega schools, that's a hard one to do. But we can talk about some of the baits that can trigger those bigger bites in those schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got two ways to kind of think about that is with those bigger schools and in here in North Carolina, unless we're talking about Sharon Harris, like we don't have a lot of lakes where they get like Tennessee Valley system.
Right.
Like, I mean, at Harris, we'll see hundreds of fish in the school sometimes, but
Yep.
that's a short window here. But there's going to be bigger fish in those schools. So how do you get them to bite?
Right.
And then the other thing is, well, if those are all cookie cutter fish, what do you got to do to go find the other fish?
That's right.
And ignore those big schools.
That's right.
Because sometimes you got to do that. And I mean, when you're fun fishing, yeah, just pull over there and go, have an absolute blast and catch like 50 in a row or something. But if you're tournament fishing, you're looking for better quality, you just want to go catch your PB or something, then sometimes it's hard to ignore those massive schools. But sometimes you have to.
That's right. So go ahead, Pete. Go ahead. I wanted to talk about what Jerry said, so go ahead.
Oh yeah, I don't like people either. So yeah, I don't like summer fishing. No, summer fishing's tough. Actually, and that's what I wanted to talk about with Paul. I know he's not on anymore because he's getting ready. He was rigging tackle for his fishing day tomorrow. But somebody made a post on one of the local pages about they were looking for somebody to go on their wake boat with them because they needed an extra. And Paul put on there. He said wake boats are now have been banned on all Raleigh lakes from until the end of November. It's $1,000 fine. And all of these people thought he was being serious. Post the link. Where can you find this? And he let him go for a little bit. And he was like, I'm kidding, folks. And I was like, this is something I can get behind, though. We should definitely have a conversation. So he got all of like the wake boaters all fired up today on Facebook because he put that on there.
Which means they're searching for if it's illegal, so they're not going to be on the lake.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Great.
But you're right, Jerry. The crowds definitely make this time of we will definitely talk about the like river fishing as well.
Okay, so
but first let's talk about lake. So I just want to answer your question about like I want to go right into you find that big school and you want to get the biggest fish in that school to bite. Your first cast and like your first 2 to 3 casts of that school are your number one chance to catch that fish, right?
Yeah.
That big one is usually going to be the first one to catch.
That is true.
If you throw the right baits. The very first bait I'm throwing on a school is a big deep diving plug. 99% of the time you are going to catch the biggest fish in the school on a deep crank like that, or the other bait you're holding, a flutter spoon. If they're suspended a little bit more up off the bottom, and that's why he was saying electronics are so important. If you side scan them, if you run over them, if you're looking with the forward facing, whatever it is, and you see that they're not on the bottom, if they're up off the bottom, that bait right there is going to catch you a good fish 99% of the time. And
absolutely,
it's not a lot of guys will see what's going on, Colin. A lot of guys will see that school and they're like, man, there's a pile of them. They pick up a drop shot and they rifle it out there. And yeah, you might catch a bunch, right?
Catch a bunch of little ones.
But you're probably not going to catch that bigger fish because the little ones are going to eat that. Whereas with that big plug, it's more appealing to that bigger fish as it comes through there.
what you said in the very beginning is true. A lot of time, the biggest fish will bite first.
That's right.
There's been a lot of times where I've caught 4 or 5 fish, like on Jordan on the off school. But that first one was a 7 or 8 pounder,
That's right.
and then everything else was 4 or 5s, 3s. Kept going down.
Which
from
sounds
there.
crazy, but that's like,
Well, think about the fish for a second, right?
It's the
Yeah.
dominant fish.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's the dominant fish, but it also is the biggest fish that gets tired the fastest, right? So you're looking at a school of 100 fish, right? Pete's dad and I were out on Lake X today, right? And we marked mega schools of them. The first school that we caught fish out of, his dad threw a big plug out there. And the very first fish he caught was 5 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went down to 3 pounds. And then it went down to another 3 pounder. And then it went down to 2 pounds. And then it was they shut off. And then it was drop shot. And then it was 2 pounder.
Yeah.
And 2 pounder, right?
and a big jig's another one that can do that. So
Right.
not to cut you off, but like for me, you have a big jig, you're fishing a lot slower. I like to hit that school with a crank or a flutter spoon because I can make 3 or 4 casts to that one with a jig. You know what I mean? Because a jig, you're kind of dragging it through the school, you're hopping it, you're working it a little bit slower.
Mm-hmm.
And a reason for that big plug being eaten by a bigger fish right off the bat or a flutter spoon or something is a lot like the winter. Those fish get lazy, right?
That's right.
Like they want to eat the biggest meal where they have to expend the least amount of energy, and then they won't have to worry about eating for a little while. So a big old giant bait fish digging in the mud coming in front of them that they can take a couple swipes, slurp that thing in, and it's done, is super appealing to them.
That's
You'll hear other guys want to throw like a big sea rig, something like that. That works too, I'm sure. But
I usually start with a big crankbait
yeah,
to begin with, even though I make jigs. And the reason is it's way more efficient. Cover that water fast, and you get a better feeling what the fish are doing. In the summertime, a big part of summertime fishing on lakes, whether you're targeting brush piles, rock piles, ledges, points, it's all about timing.
It is.
Right.
It's
So
rotation.
those fish are going to eat for small windows of time throughout the day. Right. There may be a feeding window on one brush pile in the morning. You may show up to one later. And so you got to get in the right rotation, that timing. And so that's why in the summertime, a lot of times you need 40, 50 spots. And you get a, it's not even really a milk run. You just run and hit all of them. Right.
Yep.
And you try to match it up with your practice. So you're timed up. And because you got to cover a lot of water, what I like to do in those situations, I don't like to spend more than 5 or 10 minutes at a spot.
Yep.
Unless I'm getting bit. And so that's usually the first thing I do. I pull up, if I'm graphing, I see something, I'm throwing a crankbait 4 or 5 times. And then I'll pick up like a big jig or something. This is if they're on the bottom,
Right.
like a big jig or something to drag it, or a shaky head, depending on conditions. And then if I still don't get bit after 2 or 3 casts, then I might downsize, really, like a Ned rig, drop shot, some shit. And then hopefully get bit
Yep.
at that point. If
And
you
then
haven't
if you
get bit,
don't,
and if you don't, you
throw
move
them
on.
around. Yep.
And then you try to go through that routine for moving baits, big baits, small baits, at each spot you go to. And hopefully by the first like 6 spots, you can figure something out.
Yeah, something important I want to talk about too is, we've gotten so accustomed to using our electronics to find fish, but there's a lot about the environment during summer fishing, just like any time, that you absolutely shouldn't have your face glued to the screen. And what do I mean by that? Wind direction plays a huge role, right, in positioning fish. So
and if it's not a lake that is pulling water where you have natural current.
Right. So
Yeah.
if you're on a TVA system like the Tennessee River Valley and stuff like that, you need to pay attention to when they're drawing water, right? And then we saw that on Wheeler. They went from 44,000 cubic feet per second on practice days to dropping it down to less than 11,000, right? So that place was slick, calm. And that's a very important thing, because if you're out there and you got a good wind, that the fish should position themselves on those most likely areas, those ledges, those summertime flats, whatever the case may be. They're going to wait for bait fish to get pushed across. They're going to ambush them. Then the other thing to pay attention to is when they blow up on bait, the size of the bait that comes out of the water, right? So certain areas will have a little inch long threadfin or gizzard shad pop out. And then some areas will have 2 to 3 to 4 inch gizzard shad pop out of the water. And so then you're like, oh, wow, I went from, using a jig head minnow, yes, trying to catch these suspended fish to now I'm throwing a giant flutter spoon like these Lake Fork flutter spoons or these 6 Sense flutter spoons or something like that, trying to match like a white perch or a gizzard shad or something like that. So you can't do that when your face is glued to the screen, right? So sun, wind, current, bait fish, birds are a big thing too. If you're on a body of water with stripers, such as Baden Lake or Gaston or Norman or something like that, Bugs Island, you want to pay attention to the birds too. Like nature's going to tell you a lot. So there's a lot of other things that go into everything or outside of like the electronics and stuff like that. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. So that's lakes. Rivers are a completely different ballgame. So you've usually got current, and just, where those fish are set up has a lot to do with current, has to do with water levels play a huge role when it gets up in, above normal level on a river. A lot of times it pushes those fish up into the woods because all the bait pulls up there. Everything's super, high in nutrients. All the bait, whatever it is, gills, shad, crawfish, all of that stuff is up there feeding because all of their food's up there. So it'll pull those fish, and when water's at normal level, that's when you're concentrating on pads, laydowns, stumps. If you're fishing our river systems, that's when the cypress trees really play. And you got to figure out which cypress trees, right?
Yeah.
Is it the outside trees? Is it the inside trees? Is it the mid trees?
Is it
the right side? Is it the left side? The front side? The back side? And you got to put all that together. And you'll find on our rivers, once you figure it out, and we have a pretty good video on my YouTube if you go where Trey and I went out there, where we'll answer your question 1 second, Chris, where we kind of ran around. We were trying to get on a frog bite. It wasn't there. And then we went out because we had some current pull into the sound. We got on some trees and sorry, I was reading that comment. I just saw Crybaby and thought we were talking about some pro or something. So we got on the trees on the outside with the way the current and wind were pushing, the fish were set up, and we found that the right side of every cypress tree on the outside had a fish, and we caught a bass and a flounder off of the right side of every single cypress tree down that stretch. And we went back through that stretch several times and the fish kept loading on there. So it's figuring that kind of stuff out in the river. And then the pads this time of year, if you're fishing a river system that's got big pads, especially on a channel swing or something, when the sun's up, it's hot, it's miserable. Those fish are going to pull up under those pads. It's the best cover they have. There's good shade. If you pull your boat in there, if you have one, you can use your temperature sensor, and you can see sometimes there'll be a 7, 8, 9 degree temperature difference between the main part of the water and getting up under those pads where it's been sitting in the shade all day. So fishing a river system, you've got to look at current, you've got to look at water level, and then the available cover, just depending on the type of system it is. At home in Pennsylvania, when we fished the rivers, it was a lot of overhanging trees and stuff like that in the morning. The smallmouth would push up on there because it was shallow. It was a little bit cooler. They could feed the bait fish, the crawfish, whatever it was they were feeding on was up there. And then as the day progressed, those fish, one was boat traffic, pushed them back off the bank, but two, just a natural progression. They start to slide down into that deeper water where it's a little bit cooler. So you got to approach them different, but the same, like current, wind direction. It's all important.
Yep.
On how those fish are going to set up, where they're going to set up, and where you can kind of start to target them. So breaking that that piece of water that you're fishing down and taking a look at all of that stuff is really key this time of year.
I will say on rivers, that question was about rivers, but are you asking about tidal rivers, right? Because tidal fisheries, and we saw that, Michael Catt just won the Toyota Series on the Potomac, and we're actually going to get him on. I linked up with him the other day, and that was his first major touring victory. And Michael Catt figured something out on a true tidal fishery that no one else really could figure out. So whether or not the tide is high, where it positions a fish, when it sucks out, where it positions a fish, and how those things like really apply, how it positions bait, how it positions fish, because just like Ben and Pete talked about, in the summertime, they're lazy. So even on a river that's not a tidal fishery, you're going to look for those eddies. You're going to look for those areas where those breaks are at and those fish can just chill. And usually on a river, unlike a lake, well, I guess just like a lake, they're going to be stacked. not stacked like vertically because bass don't do that, but they're going to be piled in there because they're taking advantage of being able to be lazy. Right.
It can be like an eddy up north or something, you know, and if you're fishing a southern river with cypress trees and stuff, you might find 2 fish on a tree, but again, it'll be a stretch where you'll have one on every tree.
Yeah.
Whether it's that right side, left side, it's usually whatever the down current side is. So if the current's pulling out super hard and you're looking at the tree, it's going to be on that left side. If the wind's blowing in and pushing it in, it's going to be the right side.
Yeah.
And when there's no wind and no current, it's a crapshoot. They're still going to be in that area, but it makes it a lot tougher
to figure them out.
Geez. Yeah, a lot tougher to figure out exactly where they are and what trees. I think they get a little bit lost when they don't have that current. They just kind of roam around and they get into those cypress knees and
they just hang out.
They're just a little bit less active, a little tougher to catch. But
something I, and this is, I have to give, Scott Martin some credit for this, but so summer, why do fish move out? Right. Well, they're moving out because of oxygen levels and cooler water. Shade is absolutely key.
That's why I said the pads, the up north, you get trees overhanging, and there's creeks down here where you get that too, but shade is huge.
But if you guys ever fish, so like June is mostly like that offshore game, right? Depending on where you live. But when you start pushing into like July and August, you have to think like the main lake water has usually reached the same temperature as like the shallow like pads and stuff like that. And so something that was really interesting that I learned about like Wheeler, for instance, June is usually that offshore time. But when it hits July and August, those fish start moving from the main lake back up into the shallower water, like into the pad fields and stuff like that. Because they've been beat on all June long, right? The water temperature is the same as it is on the main lake back up into where the pads are at. The pads are creating more shade, which is exactly what Jeff is talking about. So one of the best days I ever had in July was on a whopper plopper in the shade lines, Jeff, in dirt, shallow water. And we're talking high 80s, low 90-degree water temperature, but the main lake had reached the same water temperature for the most part as the shallow stuff. So it's really interesting because you guys will start to see, like, as June transitions into July and August, I mean, it's normal for shad and stuff to start pushing back up into the shallows, but really those bass will push back up into the shallows and you can whack them, dude. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thermocline plays a role in that. There's a lot of things because different lakes and thermocline will move a little bit, but yeah, absolutely. Once the water stabilizes temperature wise and everything's pea water hot, like they're going to go wherever they want to go, and where that food is number one. You got to kind of figure out.
Yep.
The fish on the show on today didn't listen to your podcast because they were hard to catch today. Yeah. You should have just went out there with a drop shot and forward facing, Jeff. That's how they did it when they were down here.
Well, pros. Jeff couldn't get his hands on any of the baits because Pete bought them all.
There's also a hot, sunny bluebird sky.
It was, high pressure. That's been all of that makes it tough.
So let's talk about that for an example, right? So you're out on your reservoir, you don't have any wind. I'm not going to say that a deep plug's not going to work because it will work. We saw it work today in slick, calm conditions, but that's where that flutter spoon really comes into play, right? That flutter spoon is going to help you guys. Like if you don't have any wind, that's really positioning the fish and you start seeing them suspending, 18 foot of water and they're sitting at like 5 to 10 foot. Man, you want to throw a big flutter spoon out there. And one of the things that if you're not a flutter spoon fisherman, don't
try it. It's terrible.
I can tell you it is one of the coolest bites ever. And if you don't know anything about flutter spoons, like hit us up in the comments. If you're going to buy one and you don't want to spend a bunch of money, you can go to Walmart and get the Strike King ones.
Sexy shad.
The sexy shad ones. Mm-hmm. I've caught more fish.
Chrome.
This is a 6 cents one right here. It's literally just a giant piece of chrome. But I will tell you this, and this is something Pete and I talked about the other day, something that really helps me. When you get these, a lot of times they don't have a swivel. This one does. The 6 cents one comes with a swivel. I use it on 20-pound Copilot. I throw it on a big Cashin ledge rod. and I throw this sucker out there with a Palomar knot. I let it fall all the way to the bottom, controlling it all the way to the bottom, and I'll give it a couple snaps. And then I'll reel in that slack and let it flutter down to the bottom. If you don't get bit on like the first like 5 or 6 times, you either need to leave that spot or you need to throw a drop shot at them. If you have slick pond water conditions, because that drop shot, you're at least going to catch some fish. You might not catch the biggest fish, but if you have no wind, man, it makes it tough in the dog days of summer. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I haven't had the experience where they won't eat a plug when there's no wind. Like I will 1000% crank them if it's dead calm, and they'll still eat it if they're on the bottom.
If
I know the wind helps set them up with that, but
yeah, I mean, think of it this way: if they're deeper than 10 foot, 15 foot, they're around that range. What's going on the surface, like it doesn't impact them nearly as much.
Right.
So, like even the water temps,
yeah,
on the surface it may read 90 degrees, but where they're at, it's 75 degrees.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't care. We run a big plug by them.
It's just about how they're set up.
It's really how they're set up and where they're
the wind does tend to, I think, because when you get that chop on the top of the water, it seems to push the fish down. The same with boat traffic, like it'll push them down to the bottom. They don't want to suspend as much. And I think that's where Trey was saying, like it makes them set up typically better. It's not that they won't eat a plug. It's just that typically slick calm, if you don't have a bunch of boat traffic, you don't have any natural, motion on the surface of the water. That's when they start that kind of flutter. A jerkbait, yeah. I mean, you can get them to eat a jerkbait.
Yeah, but jerkbait can sometimes be hard in slick conditions.
Yep.
I mean, there's days I've crushed them, and I always have one tied on because I love using a jerkbait in slick calm conditions with live scope.
Yeah,
I just love watching them follow back to the boat and hopefully catch a few that way. But the other thing is when it's slick calm out, even in Jordan where it's so muddy, but there's nothing breaking up the light.
Yeah,
right.
So that's why they're probably not as active.
Yep.
I mean, we all talk about how overcast days and windy days where it breaks up that light. They can't see as far. They just feel more comfortable. So
you brought up something pretty interesting. You talking about the jerk bait. So if you do have forward facing sonar, and even if you don't, but it's a lot easier if you do, if you're throwing a jerk bait out there or a swim bait like Pete's dad was, or a crankbait, and you're watching these fish follow your bait to the boat.
Change color.
Well, either A, change color, but B, have a backup rod ready. So as soon as you pull that plug or that jerk bait out and they're up next to the boat, you flip a drop shot or a minnow or something like that can fall, or a Nico rig or something that can fall straight down. And a lot of times you can pick up a bite because you've already interested them in what is going on. And sometimes you can get the dumbest bass in that school to bite. And I've had it numerous times this year where it's like reeling a big plug. You'll see a whole wad of them come up. They won't eat anything. I'll rip that up and throw a minnow in there or throw a drop shot in there and catch one right underneath the boat. Right. But after about 2 or 3, and we should probably talk about this too, like depending on the lake you're on, you sometimes have to let them reset. So give them about 15, 20 minutes so you can either sit on the spot or you can run to another school. And that's what we typically do, right? Go to another school, catch 2 or 3 off that, go to another school, and then make our way back to that school. I think we probably hit the same school today, probably 4 or 5 times, and we just rotated schools, catching fish off of each one. And that's what you hear the Elite Series, the BPT guys, the MPFL guys talk about. I mean, we did it in Fishers of Men, right? Like if you get on a good rotation, it's a great rotation. If you get on a bad rotation,
well, if you get on a bad rotation,
it makes for a long day.
Yeah,
because Trey and I did it in the Fishers of Men Championship. We got a bad rotation, and we chased our tails the entire day.
Yep, we got our
butts whooped because we just, we figured out after the fact and looking back and an after action report talking about like we just started on the wrong school. And continued to chase that rotation the rest of the day. If we would have started on a different school and went the other way, we would have been on the right rotation.
Or if you sat on that school all day.
Or if you sat, you can. That's another thing. You can sit on a school all day. I can't physically.
So
I can do it.
I can't, especially if they're not biting. It's hard for me to do that. But I know guys around here do that, especially because these lakes get so pressured that in the summertime, like on these Saturday tournaments, like if you get off your spot, you ain't getting back in there.
You ain't getting it
the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And so there's some guys who just get their juice hole.
Yep.
And they'll just sit there for 8 hours
Mhm.
and catch their 5 fish finally, after probably a grind. But that's such a grind. I want to
So-
go look for them.
I've done it.
Colin said if I had to get half ounce 5/8 hair jig, if they're set up the right way, hair jig is a great choice. But
Absolutely.
that's not a bottom bait. That's more of that suspended. You're kind of ripping it up off the bottom like a spoon,
Yeah,
letting it fall
yeah.
back through them.
Hair jig or spoon, a lot of times you can use those interchangeably.
Well, I'll tell
And
you
the
this.
thermocline, let's answer this before we go too far because I don't want to.
Yeah,
I don't want to
I was-
get way behind where we already are. How much mixing above and below the thermocline happens as far as temperature? Nobody knows. There's going to be some mixing because it's not like a hard line. But the thermocline's where your highly oxygenated water is going to stay above the thermocline. It's basically a dead zone below it. There'll still be some oxygen there. You'll see fish go below the thermocline for very short periods of time. But they're not going to go live down there. So like when people say I was on Jordan Lake and I was catching them in 37 feet of water in the middle of the summer, I know they're lying because
Yeah,
the
that's
thermocline's
not
never
true.
been that deep on that lake and the fish don't live there.
So what the thermocline is, it's the delineation between water densities. And so it sets up differently. What happens is in the springtime, or actually all year long, you got all this water mixing with the wind and the sun, and it's warming, cooling, heating. Well, in the summertime, that water warms up. The thing is that cold water actually is more dense. It holds more oxygen. The problem is in our lakes, things die, they fall to the bottom,
Yep.
decompose. It forces all that oxygen out.
Huh.
And so that's where you end up getting your line. And that's why it has a lot to do with how much light penetration, how deep the thermocline is. And so it's actually a pretty solid line. And below that, from that thermocline line all the way to the bottom, the water is basically the same temperature.
Huh.
And it is right above the thermocline. It's pretty cold. It's almost the same as what's below. And then it gradually increases until you get to the surface temperature at the top.
Yeah.
And so as the summer goes on, that thermocline rises. There's even less and less dissolved oxygen deeper. And so you'll see fish, they can dive down for a few seconds and all, but they're not gonna.
Yeah.
And I've seen it, and I've caught fish below the thermocline, but it's pretty standard. They're not gonna live down
Now, just out of my curiosity, catfish are a different breed, man. Like they can live out of water for a pretty long time. Do you ever see a lot of catfish below the thermocline?
there. No.
No.
Just go out on your graphs one day if your lake has a thermocline, and you can mess with your sensitivity.
Yeah.
But where that line is, that's where all the bait fish, that's where everything lines up.
Yeah, we saw it today. Like the thermocline was set up at 15.
David, to find the thermocline, just run your water and crank your sensitivity up on your 2D, and you're going to
Or
see
down scan.
or down. You can do it with like down imaging as well. You'll see a solid line. It'll be
Yep.
extremely obvious. I'll send you a picture of what a thermocline
Yeah,
looks like on the
Now,
graph.
David, in your lakes, you're not going to have.
You're probably not going to have
You're
one
not-
because your lakes are so shallow to begin with. So it's not something I would be worried about. But yeah, like Ben said, you know all of your wood that's in there is dying, decomposing, fish, grass, anything that dies in that lake and goes through the process of decomposition falls to the bottom, sucks up that oxygen, and the line is very, very definitive. So
And it can change. The line will
Trey's
change.
texting you a picture. Dave.
Different points on the lake throughout the season. It will move up and down
30 foot.
depending on how much water you have, water levels. A bunch of different environmental factors.
And when you hear people talk about a lake rolling over, that's the thermocline. Something happens, those water densities flip, and your cool
Yeah.
water comes to the surface. That warm water goes down to the bottom. So
Let's touch on that real fast
Yeah.
because everyone's like, if you're on the lake in the fall or like September, October, late summer, early fall, and you smell like that rotten egg smell, that's what happens. You have the turnover.
Yeah.
And so the water is cooled down enough to where the densities of those layers of water are equal. And so now they can just mix. And so that's what's happening is all that nasty, no oxygen waters come up to the surface. And
Yeah. Is that when you get most of your fish kills?
so
well, like in the springtime,
in the
turnover?
springtime, a lot of times,
Oh.
because that
Okay.
cold water, when it comes to the surface, will shock a lot of your bait fish and your fish, and that's what kills them.
yeah. So that's less of an oxygen issue because, in the wintertime, they'll be down 40, 50, 60, 100
Oh,
feet
I
deep.
know. Yeah.
But that cold water holds all that oxygen then and it
Yeah.
can't do it in the summertime.
Yeah. That's why typically you see those here. Those fish kills are usually shad.
Yeah.
That don't do real well with rapid changes to water temperature and don't do well with cold water.
Yeah.
When that lake starts to do that mix. If it's too fast and that cold water gets too high,
Shocks.
it'll shock them and they'll die. They're going to die like that. And then the bass just lay there and get fat. You can't catch them.
Yeah.
Jeff's you're right. Rain.
Yep.
Well, rain can help flush out in the lake too. Lakes that have a lot of current. Usually they're thermocline. They either don't have one or they set up a lot deeper, just because they've got all that moving water through there. So
What about lakes with a lot of grass?
well, my lake still has a thermocline. It's
Yeah.
got a lot of grass.
Yeah, you'll
And-
still have a thermocline.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now that grass will put. So grass is interesting because it can be beneficial in the summertime, but it can also hurt. It can also choke out a lot of other fish and
Yeah.
species
Yeah.
because what's happened? I forget the actual process in there.
Photosynthesis.
Yeah, it releases too much carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Spell.
So
No,
it's
no
using-
oxygen. That makes no sense. It takes in
But it uses too much oxygen in the process. So if you get too thick and too heavy of grass in areas, it'll choke out the oxygen as it goes through its process. And dying grass is even worse because then you have the decomposition on top of it. So that's why I know everybody gets mad and blames the state on killing the grass in Harris because they didn't care about bass fishermen. But the real
It's already
story, if
dying.
you don't believe that, if you're not one of these conspiracy theorists guys and you'll listen to science and fact, the grass was dying because of a change in water quality because we keep allowing people to build homes and destroy our water runoff system. So it was killing the grass. And the oxygen levels were getting to the point where if they didn't finish the grass off, there was a real possibility that every living thing in Sharon Harris Lake died because there was so much. And so they had to make a decision. They made a decision to spray it, kill it, get it out of there quick, to help stop the slow death of the lake, essentially. And I've seen lakes. There's lakes you can see where grass has slowly died through natural progression and it's killed the lake, and it takes 10 years, 15 years for it to rebound. Because it does grass in the water act the same as on
I don't
land,
know.
taking in CO2, releasing oxygen.
So yes, it does release oxygen, and so that's why fish love it. I mean, it was one of the reasons why fish love it. It's much more oxygenated. Most of your grass is going to filter a lot of the water out, so you have clearer water there, cleaner water. It's where all the bait fish and stuff live. I mean, that's why as anglers we absolutely love fishing around
Yeah,
most types of
Where
grass.
there's grass, there's bass.
Exactly.
But where there's dead grass, there may not be bass, but there may be bass. That's why I got a third place.
Cast
right there.
grass or
Yeah.
oh wait, that was something else.
Sometimes fish hang out in dead grass. I just want to let you know.
They do.
that. They
John, I mean, it was
they-
dead grass. John Cox was catching them in on Wheeler.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that stuff was
So-
half brown.
But dude, like summertime fishing is a great time to get out there and like just get very good with your electronics, dude. Like it's a good time to get out there. So if you're David, I just sent you a picture.
Winter's better.
Or the winter. I just sent
don't
you
have
a
the
picture
pleasure
of what the thermocline looks like. That lake that I sent the thermocline to you was 30 foot. The reason being is that water's a clear water reservoir
Oh, I know.
with a lot of grass in it, right?
That was Lake Beep.
What clock? So, that's a great question.
So the
We
black
actually-
slime snot stuff that shows up randomly is not actually a grass. It is a bacteria.
Yep.
And it's not native to a body of water. There was a bunch of things. I don't remember the exact science behind it. Go back and listen to our episode with Seth Micah. We talk about it. But once it's in a body of water, it just kind of expands. There are some systems that have it. Current helps keep it under control. So like there are some spots in Jordan where you'll find some, but Jordan, the water level rises and falls so much there's enough current that it doesn't let it take over. But I think it's Tuckertown. Is that the one that's like infested?
Tuckertown.
Tuckertown is
Is-
taken over. Harris. What did they do for Harris to get rid of it?
I have no idea,
I
but
don't
it's
know.
not there anymore.
Yeah, it's gone on Harris.
Maybe
Because
they
it used to be bad in Tornado
Yeah.
Valley.
I will tell you that if you think after it dries up and stays on your boat trailer that it's dead,
It
it's
is
not
not.
dead.
You will take it to the
Um,
next lake.
Please go listen to that episode with Seth Michael, like Pete talked about. That bacteria can actually infest a lake. So you need to
Yeah.
clean your boat, clean your trailer off.
There
um,
was some bad spots on Harris.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
Tornado Alley and all that.
Yep.
Yep.
But yeah, it's actually a bacteria. It looks like a grass. The first time I had never seen it before until I came down here, and the first time I caught some around a
You-
laydown on
you
Jordan.
say
I
that.
literally thought there was a dead body there.
Witch's hair.
Yeah, I thought it was a dead body. Like I pulled it in and I was like, this is not good.
we all call it snodgrass, but it's really just slime.
It's slime.
Nasty.
It's just
But you know
black
what though? The
sludge.
fish in Tuckertown Reservoir, if you guys ever fished it, they live in it. They don't have a choice. They live it. And there's big fish in Tuckertown.
And it's
but
mostly like on the surface and on things.
yeah. But I will tell you,
what's the stuff that grows on the trees? It's like, I think Kerr has them in different lakes, but like there's like these big bulbs that.
Oh, that's bryozoa. It's a single-celled organism that colonizes. So it looks like frog eggs.
Yeah,
It's actually, if you see it in a lake, it means the water quality is extremely high in that lake.
so it's so funny you said that because what happened during our championship?
Oh yeah, you hit one.
I hit one of the bryozoas.
Floating down the river
Yeah.
on
So
falls.
I was going like 55 and it was like, and I look back.
Trey's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Keeping on it."
And I hit one of them. It's like, it almost looks like a big booger.
It's like a big frog egg or something.
I
Yeah.
say a booger or a freshwater jellyfish.
Yeah.
But I hit one and it bogged me out.
Yeah. It's a bryozoa. They're a single-celled organism, but they colonize in those mass colonies. And
Yeah.
They just kind of float around until they get stuck on a piece of wood
Yeah,
or something.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Turtles eat them and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Cool.
So we're at an hour. We're getting up and leaving at like 2:30 in the morning to go smash some fish, some river somewhere in eastern North Carolina tomorrow. I haven't decided where we're going to go yet.
Wherever Jeff's fishing.
Wherever Jeff's fishing, Jeff, let me know where you're going to be. And
Show
I
us.
will, I'll be right there. So no, I'm trying to avoid those guys. Most of the stuff I fish, a lot of other people don't, unless Todd Parker is fishing it, or the only other person I ever really saw on my stuff was Eddie Leneve, but I think he's still in Germany. So I should stay off the show one. I'm going to try, Jeff, but if that's where I got to go to catch them,
That's the first place we're going.
Yep. See you at the show on in the morning. No, I'm gonna try some other stuff first, and then if I have to make my way over there and fish trees, that's what I'm gonna do. I hope I don't need to do that, but looking
Why?
forward to going out on the, because it's not as fun as catching them on a frog.
It's a great place.
It is a great place, but I like catching them on a frog. And
What he means
That's what I
by
wanna do.
frog, it doesn't mean a real frog.
shut up, Trey. You're so jealous. Trey's so jealous. Bring donuts. I'll roll up with the donuts.
We're gonna be bringing water, Jeff, because
Yeah.
it's about to be. I think I'm gonna put a saline lock in and have
We
a
might
couple
do that.
thousand milliliter bags. So
We need some banana bags, a little bit of potassium. We'll be
Yeah.
good to go.
hope
But
you
Jeff,
guys.
are you staying at the Sportsman? Just let me know. We're staying there. Maybe we'll grab a beer tomorrow evening and chat some. Pete will be out on the not this Pete, the other Pete.
Be careful.
We'll be out on the kayak tomorrow. Yeah, be careful, man. Make sure you wear your PFD. Make sure you wear your flag. Have a flag. Lights if you're out before light. All that good stuff. No bananas on the boat unless they're in IV form because that's a miracle drug. Holiday Inn. Okay, so you're not too far. I'll holler at you tomorrow night. Maybe we'll hook up and say what's up.
It's a Holiday Inn Express.
I don't know if it's an express. No, we're not staying in Janesville. I'm staying at the Sportsman in Plymouth. But I think I'm going to put in up in Jamesville on Sunday and fish some upper Roanoke stuff because I haven't been up there much ever. So I want to head up there and do that a little bit. But tomorrow I'll probably just run all over the world until I force a frog bite somewhere, hopefully. But yeah, appreciate everybody jumping on. If you have not gotten our giveaway yet, make sure you head to our podcast somewhere on an audio platform, leave a review, screenshot, send it to us. So that we can get you entered into our giveaway. We'll be doing it next Friday on our Fishing Friday Live. It's low up there. Be safe. Perfect. Yeah. So I can idle and mark all the stuff that won't be safe when it's normal. Yeah. So I may not go over there if it's super low. I was going to check water levels and everything, but appreciate the heads up, Jeff. Probably will avoid it if that is the case.
So we'll see you in the show.
So we'll see you in the show one. Yeah. Christine, appreciate you jumping on. Appreciate everybody joining again. Make sure you get in on our giveaway. Screenshot, review, send it to us on socials. We'll add you. That'll be on live next Friday. That made me very nervous that Trey was going to hook himself in the mouth. Make sure you check out all those. Let us do that. One Cast Fishing, Carolina Waters, Hobie Eyewear, and Eric Schwind with Mossy Oak. I'm going to put a link in the chat before we sign off that will take you to all of those links. If our keyboard will work. So make sure you check those out. If you're looking to buy some gear, support them.
Link.
And shh.
It's spelled wrong.
Oh my goodness, Trey. It's your fault.
It's Pete with the sausage fingers.
The sausage fingers.
That's a stupid keyboard.
It is.
Well,
miniature
the keyboard was made for a
The-
4-year-old.
I know. The miniature keyboard.
Everybody's mad because I bought the keyboard with my own money. Apparently, it's not good enough of a keyboard.
It's okay. Yours is.
It's okay that it's not movie quality. But appreciate y'all being here. Everybody have a safe
Thanks,
weekend.
guys.
Wear your PFGs. Drink lots of water. Go out there and whack them and help us continue to grow a culture of anglers helping anglers. one cast at a time.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.